We are Cajuns of the Bayou Teche country of Louisiana, descendants of the French Acadians of Nova Scotia who were exiled from Canada in 1755. We have lived in our new country for nearly 200 years, but we still preserve many of the customs and traditions of our Acadian ancestors, and among ourselves we continue to speak the French language. We may not be well known away from our land, but among us there was one whose story is familiar to the whole world. Longfellow called her Evangeline, and his beautiful poem of the tragic romance of the Cajun girl of the Teche is one of the classics of American literature. When the Acadians came to Louisiana, it was a colony of the Kingdom of France, and the country of the Teche was a wild and primitive land. Small rivers, which we call bayous, were then the only means of communication, and even today, though roads and railways stretch in all directions, are among our principal arteries of transportation. Small fishing boats crowd the coastal bayous, and broad lumbering freighters lazily ply the inland streams, their stern wheels churning steadily through the narrow but deep waters. Our bayous flow not only through the open countryside, but extend far into the great swamps. In well-defined deep channels, they flow along smoothly and quietly through the submerged forests of willow and cypress. There are many Cajuns who make their homes in the great swamp. They earn their livelihood trapping and fishing in the wilderness, and their only contact with the outside world is the fish boat that comes to buy their catch and replenish their larders. It's an unusual way to live, with trees for gardens, waterways for roads, and boats for houses, but some of us prefer it. It was along the edge of the Bayou Teche, in sloping meadows and among spreading live oaks, that our ancestors built their first homes. Small wooden houses were sufficient for their early needs. When their families grew, their houses grew too. Many of the hand-hewn cypress homes of the earliest pioneers are in use today. Like our forefathers, we Cajuns derive our livelihood principally from agriculture. And in our mild climate, our crops grow quickly and our cattle fatten fast. In the bayous, they can eat and take a bath at the same time. Our country is a flat one and ideally suited to the cultivation of one of our principal crops, rice. In spring, thousands of acres are flooded and planted, and 2/5 of the nation's output comes from our fields. Sugarcane is our most important crop, and we produce 90% of the sugar grown in the United States. In our level land, the straight horizon is broken only by trees. Long lines mark plantation boundaries or shade the country roads. It is said that giant spiders were once imported from China to spin enormous webs between the trees of this noble alley, and their webs, sprinkled with gold and silver dust, formed a glittering 3-mile arch for one of our famed Cajun weddings. In the Teche country are many trees. The most beautiful are the live oaks, graceful, with branches sweeping to the ground or draped with Spanish moss. Superb, in groves and avenues that form the approaches to Cajun homes. In the past, we built many grand and spacious mansions, for our families were large and our attendants were many. Hundreds of these old homes still stand, and they're as solid today as they were when built. These big old mansions are still lived in, but our 20th century tastes are for smaller dwellings. It is not unusual to see 3- and even 2-room homes in the country. In towns, their styles indicate that ours is a prosperous land, and they compare favorably with the noble old mansions, whose dignity and elegance speak of the long-existing culture of the Teche. There is hardly a home in the land without its shrubs and flowers, and some of our gardens are famous throughout the nation. We Cajuns keep alive the traditions and customs of the past, and in our land, the old exists side by side with the new. Some of our young people know only the swing, rumba, and boogie-woogie of today, but others still sing the old songs and perform the steps of Les Lanciers and the provincial dances of other days. Though centuries apart, they exist side by side. The slippered steps of old Arcadia beside the Teche, the barefoot play of young Arcadia in the schoolyard. We Cajuns speak French among ourselves, and some of our children do not learn English until they reach the classroom. There are still one-room schools in rural areas, though our other schools are among the most modern in the country. We Cajuns are Catholics, and churches throughout our land are numerous. Rarely does a Sunday pass that we do not all follow the sound of the tolling bells. Religious belief and devotion to church was one of the causes of our ancestors' exile, and they did not settle permanently until they found a land with freedom of religion and the right to worship as they chose. Today, celebrations of saints' days and religious faiths are part of every Cajun's life. Our hands have not forgotten the crafts of our forefathers, and we still do many things in old ways. We even have a use for dried corn shucks. They are dampened and then carefully braided into rope. This rope we use for the seats of our handmade cypress chairs. The chairs last for years. Corn shucks make practical hats, too. No Cajun house is without its homemade quilts, and quilting parties are still held among our country folk. Every stitch is made by hand, and when finished, they represent weeks of work. Quilts filled with homegrown cotton take the place of blankets in many Cajun homes. Another Cajun handicraft is homespun cloth. We take great pride in the preservation of this art, for there are few other spots in the nation where spinning wheels still turn. Age does not stay our fingers nor halt our usefulness, and 94 years is not overlong in the span of a Cajun's life. The raw cotton is thoroughly combed and rolled, and then deftly twisted into cord. Cord that will be woven by hand into material that is little changed since the days before our ancestors came to the land of the Teche. We Cajuns have not forgotten to go ahead with times, though. And in contrast to the quaint countryside are the up-to-date little towns and small cities. None is large, for we are not a very numerous people, but each of our towns has the air of a little metropolis. Unusual architecture is to be found in some of our churches. And our older public buildings often reflect our French ancestry. New civic structures are modernistic in design. The steeple of Carencro looks down upon many events in a Cajun's life, but none is more attractive or more important to a Cajun girl than the wedding day. In the Teche, it is a milestone in life where Acadian brides reveal one of the strongest traits of French heritage. For every Cajun girl has an inherited love of fine silks and soft satins. Veil and bouquet of the present, horse and carriage of the past. There is perhaps nothing that exemplifies more clearly the two sides of our Cajun lives. The one that is modern, an active, proud part of the great nation of Americans. The other that is old, a community of peoples who live quietly and contentedly in the land which we Cajuns call the Teche.